We are now attending the Standing Committee on Appropriation, Standing Committee on Appropriations meeting. We are going to receive the fourth quarter expenditure report from National Treasury. Having said that, I therefore would welcome the Deputy Minister Masondo and Dr. Mampo and the team will be taking us through the presentation. Again, we know the housekeeping rules. When you are not talking, please make sure that you are muted. When you talk, please, would like to see you. Switch on the video. And obviously, if you talk, you must unmute. And the rest of us should be muted. With those, I know the other members who are in other meetings, but they will be joining us. Darren, can I check apologies that we're having?
Chairperson, yes, we received 3 apologies. It's from Mr. Sarupem, Mr. Kwankwa, and Mr. Ntlangwini. And then Mr. Sheikh Imam said that he is going to join the meeting, but he also needs to attend the plenary.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Darren. DM Masondo, please come in with your team. You will make that presentation. You'll decide how you go about. You know how we do it. And Dr. Mampo, 45, 1 hour. Then you bring the meeting back to me. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. DM is trying to log in. Can I ask that Darren assist him? And then once he has joined, I will let the meeting over to him. Is that fine, Chairperson?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
He's in the meeting. He's in the meeting. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, DM, I've just started the meeting. Welcome you.
No, it's okay, Chair. Sorry, I was struggling to join, but my technical problem has been solved.
No,
you seem frozen from my side. I don't know if it's only me.
Yeah, it was on only you, but no, I was just introducing the meeting, DM. Saying that we're receiving the fourth quarter from National Treasury, and I was given an opportunity to see how you go about between yourself and Dr. Mampo. So we've got an honor of being addressed by the two doctors, full bench of doctors today. Yeah, I think you did indicate to me that again you will have to leave us before the end of the meeting because of another responsibility at SASRE. I think we should note that there's an AGM at SASRE, and the deputy minister must preside over that. DM, please come in. Dr. Mampo, freeze DM foot.
I'm trying to check as Chairperson.
Take your time, it's fine.
Thank you. Chairperson, ODM is struggling to join and I can't find him on the phone. Should I not proceed with the presentation and then when he joins, he can then make his remarks?
Perfect. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chairperson. So today's presentation, what we thought of doing for the committee as a team was to do a proper dive-in assessment on the 2021-22 spending outcomes. And we wanted to bring this discussion to the committee now before you finalize the appropriations bill. And we're thinking that it will definitely assist the committee when you have these bilaterals with the departments so you can see how their spending patterns have been. We have also, Chairperson, added an additional section on the disaster funding. And I'm going to ask later on Ms. Ulrike to do the presentation. It's about 3 or 4 slides that will give the committee the update of where we are in terms of the disaster funding. So, Chairperson, I'm just sharing my screen so that you can see what I'll be presenting. Firstly, we're going to look at the departments that showed the most underspending, the ones that showed the overspending, and additional information, as I said. So, Chairperson and honorable members, for the year 2021-22, the overall underspending by departments was 14.9 billion. That is 1.5% of the spending. That's equivalent to 1.5% of the available budget as at the MTBPS. Chairperson, if you look at the categories or the economic classifications of where this underspending was, it is clear that the underspending was under goods and services. We're going to dive into which types of goods and services showed the most underspending. And then the second category, Chairperson, of the underspending was transfers and subsidies, where we saw a most underspending. And then the last one, where we saw a bit of underspending, would have been on payment for capital assets. Now, Chairperson, this graph gives you a full overview of the departments that showed the most significant underspending, and those ones would be the Department of Cooperative Governance, where the underspending for the year was equivalent of 2.781 billion. The next department that showed significant underspending was the Department of Water and Sanitation at 2.5 billion. And then Environmental Affairs, Forestry and Fisheries, 1.6 billion. National Treasury also showed an underspending of 1.283 billion. Agriculture, Rural, Land Reform and Rural Development, 1.092 billion. These are the top 5 departments that shows the most significant underspending, Chairperson, that we will dive into details even more. However, it is important to note that even the Department of Police, close to 1,878,000,000 underspending, Human Settlement, Employment and Labor, DECO, Transport, Justice and Constitutional Development showed quite significant underspending. Basically, Chairperson, what we also wanted to show the committee in this slide is that we went back to look at the underspending patterns over the last 3 years. And here we basically show the underspending in terms of the numbers, in terms of the rent values. So if you look, Department of Cooperative Governance, which is COGTA, has always been underspending significantly over the past 3 years. If you look in 2019-20, which is the red bar, the underspending was 3.4 billion. Last year, in 2020-21, the underspending was 3.6 billion, and in 2021-22, the underspending was 2.8 billion. The Department of Water and Sanitation is the same issue, Chairperson and honorable members. The underspending is similar to last year's underspending, same as Environmental Affairs and the other departments. The good one where we saw significant underspending in 2020-21 was police of 4.1 billion, but that improved quite a lot in the current year. And Chairperson and honorable members, sometimes when you do this analysis, you have to look at the impact, you have to look at the share of the underspending relative to the budget, because for a department that is big, 100 million relative to the overall budget is too small. But if you look at a department that is small, 100 million can be a significant amount in terms of the share of the underspending to the total spending. So this particular graph shows you the spending as a share of the spending, of the actual spending. The departments that we have highlighted with the green arrows are the departments that show underspending, whether you look at them in terms of the rand value of underspending, or you look at them as a share of total spending. They are underspending, and those departments are DFFE, Employment and Labor, Water and Sanitation features as well. DECO is here, Agriculture is also here. Status A is here. So there's several of them that, whether you look at them in terms of the numbers or you look at them in terms of the percentage of underspending, they are still the culprits of underspending. The ones that are new in this graph that we think the committee can look at them would be the underspending in the presidency, the underspending in the military veterans, because here, Chairperson, we're looking at 11% of total underspending relative to the department's budget in 2020-21, and then we're looking at an increase to 15% in 2021 and 22. And then another one that the significant underspending will be the Department of Traditional Affairs, although the 2021 underspending is better at 10%, but still it's still significant relative to their budget. Then, Chairperson, what we also did, what we're trying to show the committee is, where is this underspending? Where do departments tend to underspend? So this is the overall spending patterns of all the departments. We will reclassify the departments later on in the presentation. But what we wanted to show the committee is that the culprits of underspending are buildings and other structures. So the graph basically on top represent underspending, and then at the bottom will represent overspending. So basically, if you can see, since 2017-18 to 21-22, the budget on buildings and other structures has been underspending, although the underspending is slightly better in 2021-22, but the amounts in buildings and other structures remains, the underspending remains quite large. And then in the last two fiscal years, 2020-21 and 21-22, goods and services has shown quite significant underspending. And this is the percentage looking at the allocation vis-a-vis the total the underspending. And then another one that has a lot of underspending, Chairperson, would be spending on machinery and equipment. But if you look at transfers and subsidies, if you look at compensation of employees, and if you look at payments for financial assets, those categories remain very close to the allocations where we don't see a lot of movement. So it's these big three, Chairperson, that we've picked up where there is significant underspending. Then what we also did was then we had to look at within goods and services, which goods and services showed the most significant underspending. And what we picked up is that the percent of actual that is significant is under administrative and operational expenditure. So we also tried to zoom in what does administration and operation expenditure entails. And basically, Chairperson, those would be things like your advertising, your bursaries, catering is also a big one with 65% under expenditure. We looked at consultants, business and advisory, 51%, entertainment, which makes sense because most people were not in the office at 83%. There wasn't really much spending in housing. And then another one that showed significant underspending would be training and development at 32%, but also venues and facilities at 45%. Then what we also did, Chairperson and honorable members, to assist the committee in understanding the numbers, we looked at the monthly spending and we compared the monthly spending over 3 years. And here, the main thing that we were trying to do is to show the committee that in general, they tend to be what we refer to as the March spike. So departments will spend quite low amounts of money during the course of the year. And once we get into the financial year end, that's where they will be pushing a lot of these invoices. So this is just the total spending on a monthly basis. But then if you look at the buildings and other fixed structures, that's where, Chairperson and honorable members, you see a significant increase in March. So basically, most of the departments tend to finalize their invoices in March to try and deal with the cost for the rest of the year. And this becomes a problem, Chairperson, because it basically means that if the departments wait for so long to finalize the invoices, we will have to do virements at the end of March, and that can definitely be perceived as fiscal dumping. So we looked at the big categories that show the spike. So it's not only buildings and other fixed structures, but it's also for goods and services. So if you look at goods and services each year, Chairperson, from 2019, 20, 21, 22, you can see that there is a mild spike where departments finalize their invoices in March. This is also the same as machinery and equipment, where there is significant increases in March, and unfortunately for this year, the increase were much larger than in the previous years for machinery and equipment. The one item that seems to be, or category that seems to be broadly in line, would be transfers and subsidies, where the spike is not as significant. So, Chairperson, that would be the assessment that we did on the overall expenditure. Now we start looking at the departments themselves. So in this time for the year, Chairperson, there were 2 departments where they showed overspending, and those departments, Chairperson, was the health department as well as social development. So just quickly on social development, Chairperson, what we're picking up is that there is an over expenditure of about 962 million, just close to $1 billion. But because the allocations were made through different special appropriations, Section 16 of the PFMA, once all of those are updated and once all of those numbers are put into the budget for October, then we're highly unlikely to see the continuous underspending. This is just some of the bills are still in Parliament, as you would know, Chairperson. So once all of these have been consolidated, we don't foresee that there will be such an increase in their overspending. So we're not worried about the overspending, because once the different appropriation bills have been enacted, it will deal with the overspending that we see. We also tried to do the same analysis, Chairperson, where we look at underspending in goods and services, where we look at the mild spike in social development, but we're not picking up quite a lot because most of the funding for social development goes to transfers and subsidies. So if you look at the red line under transfers and subsidies, you can see that it remains stable. The variation in the 2 years is because of the announcement when we had to pay for the 350 SRD. But in terms of their spending patterns, when there are no changes, Chairperson, then the transfers are quite smooth in the Department of Social Development. Then in health, Chairperson, is the same issue that you see an over expenditure of 366 million. But this over expenditure, you are already considering the second special appropriation bill where we're proposing an allocation of 500 million. Once that is passed by the committee, or if it's passed by the committee and Parliament, then that overspending will not be there. Then the numbers for health will be aligned to what is allocated to them. So this is purely what was allocated in the MTBPS. We also did the same analysis, Chairperson and honorable members, but we're not picking up a spike in the Department of Health. Then, Chairperson, we start zooming into the top 5 departments where they recorded the significant underspending. And the first one that we are looking at would be the Department of Cooperative Governance. So in this round, as I said, Chairperson, we're looking at an underspending of 2.8 billion, and this is equivalent to 2.7% of their actual spending. And if you look at the underspending, Chair, it's basically been under transfers and subsidies. That was the first one, but also they showed significant underspending under goods and services. I mean, there's several reasons for this, but basically it's the offsetting of the local government equitable share, and this is against the rollover funds that were not approved and transferred into the National Revenue Fund. We also have slow spending by the Department on community works programs, and this mainly, according to the department, is due to the equity requirements that were declared unconstitutional. But Chairperson, what we wanted to show in this department is that overall, under goods and services, the department tends to overspend. The only 2 years where there were minimum underspending was in 2015 and in 2019-20, but for the rest of the years you can see an underspending, and this is the same as the transfers and subsidies. They have been underspending there, and only in 2021 there were minimal underspending, but still, I mean, we're looking at over $1 billion in terms of underspending per year. And then when we look at the goods and services in terms of the spike, there is a spike, but it's not significant that we worried about the spike. But I think here the biggest problem that we have with the department would be the underspending. Then looking at water and sanitation, Chairperson, we did the same assessment. And for this year, for the 2021-22, the underspending was 14%, 14.3% of the actual spending. And basically the reasons that we obtained from the department for the underspending is because of the unprocessed or disputed invoices. They have a lot of contractual disputes and litigations, and this is mainly on the emergency drought relief interventions. They also stated that there were low operational costs for the Vaal River remediation intervention projects. If you look at their underspending over time, the biggest category of underspending would be under buildings and other fixed structures where it constitute about 39% of the underspending. They also had some underspending under goods and services of about 800 million. And then we also, of course, looked at some of the trends, and we looked at the underspending or overspending in goods and services, and we're picking up that in the past 3 years prior to 2020-21, they were underspending, but for the last 2 years, the department showed overspending. This is the overspending on buildings and other fixed structures, and the department unfortunately shows some element of having a March spike, but in 2021-22 the amount was less than in 2019-20. But we sort of monitoring the March spike just to make sure that we don't encourage the departments to do their spending at the last end. But what we pick up is that the trend in buildings and other fee structures remains a problem, because as you can see, Chairperson and members, most of the spending picks up in March. Then we looked at environmental, forestry, and fisheries, where their underspending of 1.6 billion is equivalent to 17.7%. And the reasons that we got from the department for the underspending is basically slow processes in providing or in appointing service providers. And this is for the EPWP, and also slow procurement processes for procurement of trees and plantation seeding as a result of COVID restrictions. But if you look at the past 3 years, Chairperson and honorable members, you would see that the department has been underspending under goods and services. And the underspending, unfortunately, has increased from 27% to 45% in this current year. And this can be seen in this graph, where you can see a persistent increase in the underspending. In terms of looking at the goods and services spike in March, it's not too pronounced, so we don't think that the department pushes invoices to the end of the year. Then we're looking at National Treasury Chairperson, and the underspending of 1.3 billion is equivalent to 2.8% of their baseline. And basically the reasons that we got from the departments are aligned to the rest of the departments, I guess, where there were delays in initiating of the tender processes for some of their projects, including the IFMS pilot. And also, as you know, Chair, there was the fact that the Land Bank could not achieve or adhere to the criteria or conditions that were placed on the 5 billion. It meant that Treasury couldn't transfer the funds, which also added to the underspending. We also did the same, just looking at the underspending on goods and services, and there is a trend that is prevailing on the Treasury's budget. In terms of the March spike, we're not seeing such significant increases at the end of the year. Agriculture, land reform, and rural development. This was a underspending, Chair and honorable members, of 6.1%, equivalent to 1.1 billion, and most of this is attributed to delays in payment of vouchers for support for smallholder farmers, but also there was the delays in the settlements of land claims and the finalization of the land acquisition processes. This underspending basically is comprised of goods and services of close to 1 billion, but also transfers and subsidies. The underspending there was close to 400 million. This is just the graph that looks at the overall underspending, but I think this year it's one of those few years where they have underspending. In the last couple of years, the department was overspending in goods and services, but it was underspending in transfers and subsidies. And then we also picked up that there's a tendency for the department to finalize most of their invoices in March, and the 2021-22 spike increased significantly compared to the previous years. We also looked at transfers and subsidies, and we see a similar trend where there is a very large increase in the March numbers. Then, Chairperson, because we're only looking at the big five, but we still felt that it would be good to show the committee members the spikes on goods and services for the departments where we picked up some of the spike. We looked at the Defence Force. This is the spike of the Defence Force, although it's in terms of the graph doesn't look significant, but if you look at the amount, 1.8 billion, you can see that there's a significant increase, or they tend to spend a lot in March. We also looked at Department of Employment and Labour. when we looked at the goods and services, this is even very clear. The spike starts in February and they finalize most of their invoices in March. This would be the Department of Higher Education and Training, where we're picking up the same trend. Department of Human Settlement is the same. Department of Justice and Correctional Services tend to have the same trend. Military veterans also similar. In police, we're also picking up this trend, although not as strong, but there are environments that they request in March to try and deal with some of the invoices that they couldn't deal with during the course of the year. So, Chairperson, that is just a summary of the outcomes, and I'm hoping that it will allow, or the assessment can help the committee in dealing with the appropriation bill, given the fact that now it is you have a side on the underspending that we are reporting, or that we are seeing as the Treasury, and most of the departments that you still have to engage with, it might assist engaging with them, including these underspending trends. So, Chairperson, just quickly, may I please be allowed to ask Ulrike just to give you an update on the disaster funding. Ulrike, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Mampo. Can you move to the next slide, please? So, honorable members, we have issued a range of instructions and circulars since the declaration of the disaster on the 17th or 18th of April. Just important to note that something has changed around the procurement system, and emergency procurement, and amongst others, has been issued through in terms of the supply chain management instruction note. The issuing of the deviations and all of that is done by the accounting officers and not the National Treasury anymore. So we have issued, so the dashboard with the supply chain reporting requirements has gone live last week. We've also circulated to departments, provinces and municipalities a bunch of circulars related to reminding them of the options that they have available on how to respond to the disaster, and what the reporting requirements that we have put in place to deal with that. Can you go to the next slide, please, Mampo? So based on those circulars, I mean, we've had to grant a couple of approvals. In relation to human settlements, we have brought forward the payments and adjusted the payment schedules for KZN and the Eastern Cape in relation to the Human Settlements Development Grant and the Informal Settlements Upgrading Partnership Grant. We have shifted some money in the Department of Water and Sanitation to provide water tankering in Ugu, Ilembe and eThekwini. And there was an approval for 50 million rand shift for flood relief within the Department of Small Business and Development. The province has submitted requests to the National Disaster Management Center and to the Departments of Human Settlements to access the emergency or the immediate relief grants that we have. We have 2 grants on the cooperative governance vote and 2 grants on the human settlements vote. It is important to note, Chair, that it is taking the departments a little longer to process this than normal, because the requests are far greater than the amounts that we have available in the grant, and we have to look at what the alternatives are to ensure that some of these needs are adequately funded. What we have not approved, honourable members, is an unearmarking of transfers on the budget of the Department of Transport for the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa. The requirements are that we have for CRASA in the budget, and what they need in relation to the provision of or the rehabilitation of rail infrastructure suggests that CRASA has sufficient money without moving this year's budget and its historic underspending. It has sufficient money to deal with the response without having to move money around in this year's budget, and we have communicated that to the department. Should there be a need later in the year to look at this again, we will do that. But as you know, honourable members, we have come and shown you that CRASA is a serial underspender of its capital budget. And so the ability of PRASA to respond from a budgeting point of view, we think that they are able to do that within what they currently have. What we are struggling with is in relation to the Department of Transport, who has sent us a submission around roads. And this one is a little bit worrying, because what we had asked the department for was kind of project level details for us to understand what is needed now and what can be done immediately versus what needs long-term rehabilitation. The proposal from the department initially was not consistent with the institutional framework in the Disaster Management Act. And whilst it's important to understand that whilst this is declared a national disaster, the powers and functions and the responsibilities of provinces and municipalities in relation to this will remain, even though it is a national disaster. National government will not necessarily implement where the functional responsibility lies with provinces and municipalities. We will require them to undertake the necessary actions, and with the funding support from national will support that. So if you go to the next slide, please, Mambo. Honorable members, so this is what worries us a little bit. So we have issued a circular around expenditure and how to classify expenditure in relation to disaster response and the budget associated with that. And what this slide shows, honorable members, is how poorly that is currently being implemented. So what it's showing, and these numbers are in rands, is that, so you would have seen all the approvals that we had granted in the previous slide, yet expenditure is not being tagged properly. And this suggests that currently we've only spent 538,000 Rand in relation to, in response to the disaster. And these are the departments within the, we've done this for all provinces, and this is what's popped up in the system. It does suggest that there's very low compliance on the reporting side, and we have to fix that. And that is why these numbers look so low. If you go to the next slide, please, we do the same for municipalities. This isn't verified, but in the latest report that we have received on municipal expenditure, we see that eThekwini municipality has already spent 60 million Rand and reprioritized it from their own budget internally in response to the disaster. I think that's it from me, Mambo. Thanks.
Dr. Mampo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you so much. This is us. We just have a couple of slides that give you further assessment of the spending, but I think we have covered all the core elements that we wanted to share with the committee. I think DM is now back online, so are we allowed to give him the space for him to comment, Chairperson?
Yes, DM, please come in. Sizwile inhlungu yakho ukuthi we are struggling to keep on freezing. Please come in, just make your comments if you want to do that. We also did share with the committee that you have got another engagement somewhere.
No, thanks, Nyabonga. I think the team has done a good job. I think they've well presented what you called us for. And I think at this stage, perhaps we should take questions and comments and guidance from you as usual. Like I said, because there's a Sastria AGM taking place, I will have to go and join it. As a shareholder, we've got to be part of that AGM. So you'll have to excuse me. Say around 2:45, and my apologies for that. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable DM. In fact, I'm busy thinking about what Honorable Mashangu said during our earlier meeting, and I'm looking at all those books behind you. It looks like the Tambo Mandela practice, Ngempela. Honorable members, let's say,
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chairperson. I forgot Ravesh's presentation on state-owned companies. Are we allowed to do that, Chair? As case I was so focused on the spending side.
No problem. Ramesh, come in, please.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I'm going to put up the presentation and my team will basically take us through the slides. So just give me a few secs. There we go. Chairperson, just checking if you can see the slides.
Yes, we can.
Okay, let's then proceed. The first SOC will be ESCOM. It's over to Jeff.
Jeff, let's run. Ramesh, if Jeff can come in, please take us through the presentation.
Oh, can you hear me now, Chairperson?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yes. Chair, as ESCOM is known to be the biggest risk to the sovereign, resolving the security of supply and reliability, it's a priority that you're actually focusing on. The high level of debt that ESCOM is sitting with, it poses a significant going concern risk to the financial sustainability of the entity, given its large commitments that it has and also the exposure that it has to the fiscals. So it is important that the going concern issue is addressed as well as the financial challenges. The high level of debt is actually putting a lot of pressure on the entity to service its debt. Members would be aware that on a standalone basis, ESCOM is struggling to meet its obligation without the financial support that government has actually provided. So the operational, the internally generated revenues are not sufficient to cover the debt servicing cost, which put a lot of pressure on the entity's liquidity. However, we must also indicate that the fiscal or government support that has been actually advanced to ESCOM has, to an extent, assisted in reducing the debt somehow, as at March, because the equity injection that you've allocated, one of the conditions is that it must go directly to redeeming the debt and interest. So as at March, we see a slight decrease. However, it is still higher than what the entity can actually carry on its balance sheet. The revenue increased slightly in the year that just ended because of the increase in the tariff, which was about 15.06% and 17 for municipal distributors. Chair, we must indicate that on the equity allocation that has been provided to ESCOM of 230 billion, so far about 136 billion has been advanced to the entity. However, when you look at what the fiscus has provided to the entity since 2008, we are sitting at about 241 billion, which is a significant amount. The guarantees that we've actually backed up the entity to be able to raise the debt. And understanding that there are three sources that ESCOM, or funding sources that ESCOM relies on. One amongst is the reliance on the funding because of the pressure that the entity is facing. The minister has allowed ESCOM a special dispensation for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal financial year, which amounts to about 42 billion and 25 billion, while the teams jointly from DPE, ESCOM and NT are working on a financial solution that will be sustainable for the entity going forward. On the guarantee package of 350 that has been provided, at March, there was about 322 that was actually committed, leaving the balance of about 28 that is still available for drawdown. Next slide, Ramesh. Chairperson, if we move on to the next slide, which deals around with the operational challenges. If Ramesh can move to the next slide.
Apologies, it's frozen. Let me just try again.
while Ravesh is putting up the slide, Chair, maybe I can just talk through what the slide contains, which is the operational challenges, which revolves around the EAF that Eskom, that is a measure of what is currently available into the system. The members and everybody is aware that we are actually currently experiencing rolling load shedding, which is a result of inadequate maintenance, as well as yes, Chairperson.
Jeff.
Yes, Chairperson.
Two things. Just remember that you are not talking to people like you who understand some of these acronyms, but even more important, you are also talking to the people out there who are listening to you. So when it says first aid in full, the EAF, the UCLF, and so on.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson. The EAF, I'm referring to the capacity that's available in the system. The OCGTs, I'm referring to the diesel usage, the diesel plants that Eskom has been using, which is quite significant. As March, the amount, it was about 6.4. This is concerning, Chairperson, because what happens is that in relation to the diesel usage, there's an amount that the regulator normally allows Eskom via the tariff to be recovered. And if Eskom exceeds that amount, it then has to go back to the regulator and request that amount to be passed through the tariff. If the regulator determines that that amount is not or has not been prudently incurred, the regulator may not actually allow, which then has an impact on the Eskom's financial bottom line. So it is quite concerning from where we're sitting that the diesel has been used quite significantly. And this is as a result, Chairperson, of the unplanned losses. You'd see that the unplanned losses as a result of the lower than what was targeted energy availability, which was sitting at 62 against a target of about 74, tells us that the entity is sliding, and this is quite a challenging and a concerning issue for us. And that has resulted in huge unplanned losses against what was planned. You'd see that it was sitting at 25% against the target of 14%. This is quite worrying, and that tells us that Eskom is really experiencing challenges in this regard. If we move on to the next slide, Ravesh. Chair, the committee and members would recall that Eskom, in granting Eskom the equity allocation or government support, there has been conditions that were attached to the support that's been granted. For the year ending 2021-2022, there's been 18 conditions that Eskom has been imposed on Eskom, and we've been regularly monitoring these conditions, and Eskom has been complying. So what we do in our analysis, we look at whether Eskom has fully complied, that is providing the full information as we have agreed, or not complied, that there are certain gaps that are required. So if you find that Eskom or partially complied, if you find that Eskom has not complied, what we do is we withhold the drawdowns as they request them. However, we must say for the financial year ending in March, or as at 28 February, Eskom has been providing all the information as we require. This assists us, Chairperson, in planning our cash flows as well, because that actually gives us a sense of when Eskom would require the drawdowns and what Eskom is doing from an operational point of view. However, as we said in the previous slide, that the energy availability factor, which is a key in terms of driving or reducing the load shedding, is sliding, and the unplanned losses are increasing, which is a concern. And therefore, that tells us that Eskom will continue to use diesel to close the gap, and that has a financial implication, as I have alluded previously. The next slide, Ravesh. Chair, one of the critical areas that we're also looking at, there's two areas. One is around the revenue. The committee and members would recall that last year, as the regulator rejected Eskom's application for the next MYPD period of 3 years. However, Eskom lodge a complaint, a court challenge against the regulator's decision, which then translated in the regulator being ordered to adjudicate that application of Eskom, and the determination was made on the 2nd, around the 25th of February, which then meant that from the 1st of April this year, Eskom has been granted about 9% increase. However, for the next financial year and the year after, Eskom is still taking the regulator to court to request the court to set aside the entire decision, because as things stands now, Chairperson, Eskom would not be able to impose any tariff increase in the next financial year if the regulator cannot make a determination around the methodology that needs to be implemented, as well as how it's going to be adjudicated. So the concern really, Chair, is that as things stands now, we are in June now, and there's only 9 months into March. We are not sure whether the regulator will be able to conclude its processes and allow Eskom to factor in the new methodology if it decides on the new methodology before the 15th March deadline is required. From an unbundling perspective, Chairperson, Eskom is making progress. The transmission company has been registered with the CIPSC, and the regulator is now waiting for the license determination from the regulator. At the same time, the entity is engaging with its lenders for consent to be able to transfer the assets into this subsidiary. This is a critical step, Chairperson, in the process, because the lenders need to provide consent that Eskom can separate these assets. And without that consent, Eskom would not be able to then unbundle itself into these 3 entities as per the roadmap from the DPE that was published. So this is a critical area that Eskom needs to comply with. The distribution company as well is ongoing. We are already in the process of considering the PFMA approvals for the establishment of the distribution company. On the other side, the DMRE has concluded its public hearings on the proposed electricity regulation bill, which will then give a clarity on the sector, on how the sector would look like in future, and how the unbundling process would actually be given effect. The target for the legal separation of the distribution and generation, Chairperson and honorable members, is still the 31st of December this year, calendar year. Moving along, Ramesh. So, Chairperson, that will be all in terms of Eskom. If we move on to the South African Post Office, SAPO has historically been struggling with defining its role from a perspective of commercial enterprise within the ICT space while balancing its developmental mandate. However, a number of reforms have been implemented, and SAPO's mandate was strengthened from a legislative point of view to assist the SAPO to turn around. However, the entity continues to struggle with its commercial revenue. The SAPO Act is currently being finalized by the shareholder department for amendment to strengthen the entity's mandate. In the fourth quarter, what we're seeing, Chairperson, given the economic recovery, that the entity has continued to sluggish from a financial position, with revenues being negatively impacted by this, Chairperson. What is of concern, Chairperson, from a SAPO point of view is the expenditure is continuing to outstrip revenue. This is a critical concern, Chairperson, because if an entity continues to have expenditure that outstrip revenues, that talks to the entity's inability to continue operating as a going concern, as well as its financial sustainability going forward. So this is an area that really requires much attention for the entity to continue to drive down its expenditure. However, consultation with its shareholder ministry have actually been continuing, and the entity and the shareholder ministry have now finalized a new strategy, which is called the Post Office of Tomorrow, which aims to turn the business around in light of the technological changes that had forced the entity to lag behind. Although this implementation, SAPO is saying they have commenced with this strategy, it remains challenged and concerning that it relies largely on the funding that is required on a number of key areas that underpins the strategy. And without funding, Chairperson, then the strategy may not actually be successfully implemented. And that is one of the critical areas around this, the entity's turnaround. The entity has implemented the voluntary severance packages, which has reduced the number of employees from 790, of which 650 were through VSPs, and then the remaining 140 were through natural attrition. The next slide, Ravesh. From a finance point of view, Chairperson, as at March, as I indicated earlier, that the financial position continues to be to be severely constrained, and cash flow is managed very closely because, as I indicated, the revenues are being outstripped by the expenses, and that is a concern. The entity has declared a net loss of 830 million against a budget of 368. This demonstrates, Chairperson, that the entity is really in financial constraint, that even the losses are outstripping what the projected numbers were. The revenue, as indicated earlier, Chairperson, was reported, which is also below what the target was, and there's a decrease from the prior year. And this is a trend that is concerning, that revenues are going down on a year-on-year basis, and instead of turning around for the entity. Expenditure, as I indicated, has just outstripped even the actual performance, and it is above budget, and this is a concern that we are raising, Chairperson. Creditors and accruals amount to about 4.4 billion, and this includes the salary debt of 150, which relates to the previous financial year. We must indicate, Chairperson, that there are no government guarantees that are currently in place for SAPO, and no funding has been allocated for SAPO in this coming financial year. Thank you, Chairperson. That's all for us from SAPO's perspective.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Solufelo.
Ravesh?
Okay, Chair, we're waiting for Solufelo. But in the meantime, maybe let me continue. I think in terms of Sasria, we've basically, like as we reported in the past, they basically had a 22 billion rand injection due to assist it for its claims that arose from the July 2021 unrest. It's basically been provided to assist to maintain its 100% solvency cover ratio, and then following the equity injection, we see that that Sasria is solvent and non-liquid, and thus a going concern. What's happening with Sasria in terms of how it's looking at its future business model is that it's looking at diversifying its revenue to build up its capital reserves. It's also looking at different avenues with regards to how it sells its product through various distribution channels, and it's also introducing new products. In terms of the claims at the moment, as of 19 May, they've estimated the claims to be around about 34 billion, but those claims will settle around 32 billion. And then of those claims that they've received, they've they settled 23.36 billion. And then in terms of its solvency cover ratio, as we've said, they are planning to recover it by 120 or 220% by June 2022, and then that will also see an improvement to the solvency cover ratio of 166% as of March 2023. We continue to monitor Sasria through bi-weekly meetings in terms of ensuring that it meets its condition, and that we also ensure that it also settles claims and also achieves its solvency cover ratio. Chair, that's all on Sasria. And then if we move on to SAA, which is Mr. Patu Rasevichele, if he's online, please can you go ahead?
Good afternoon, Chairperson and honourable members. So we're requested to provide quarterly updates to honourable members on the 2.7 billion that had been allocated to SA subsidiaries. As a background, Chairperson, the 2.7 billion formed part of the 10.5 billion, which was provided to SAA as part of the business rescue process. However, since the 10.5 billion was specifically and exclusively earmarked for SAA's business rescue, and thus could not be transferred to subsidiaries, to resolve this impasse, the Special Appropriation Act provided for that of the 10.5 billion that has been allocated to SAA, SA Technical would receive just over 1.6 billion, Mango Airlines would receive 819 million, and Airships would receive 218 million. Okay, you can move to the next slide, Ramesh. Chairperson, on the next two slides, we will give an overview of the...
Sorry. Previous slide, so that the last bullet point, is that correct, that you said airline remain under care and maintenance until September 2021?
Yes, so the airline, the SA exited the business rescue on the 30th of April 2021, but remained under care and maintenance. This was the time when SA was out of the business rescue process, but was not flying at the time, but they resumed operations in September 2021, and their operations are ongoing. Apologies for that oversight, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks. So on the next two slides, we'll give an overview of the three subsidiaries which were allocated funding. Mango was placed under business rescue on the 10th of August 2021, and its business rescue practitioners published the business rescue plan on the 29th of October 2021. The funding allocated to Mango was transferred to the airline in three tranches. The first tranche of 100 million was used to cover salaries between July and September 2021, as well as to cover the costs of developing the business rescue plan. The second tranche was transferred in November 2021 and was utilized to cover for voluntary service packages and for some restructuring costs. And the last tranche of funding, Chair, was transferred on the 31st of March of 2022. And it will be utilized to implement the business rescue plan. With SA Technical received just over 1.6, almost 1.7 billion. Of that, 700 million was used to pay outstanding salaries. As you are aware, Chair, they needed some funding for spares as well, so 79 million was allocated for that. And the remainder, which amounts to 879 million, is being utilized to complete the restructuring process and to provide working capital for the business. Chairperson, although SA Technical continues to incur some losses, but the resumption of flights by some of its major customers is expected to increase its revenue generating activities. You can move to the next slide, Ramesh, thanks. And then on Airships, so the entire 218 million has been transferred to Airships. 107 million was used to pay for employee salaries, and 111 million was for the restructuring of the company. A number of Airships' key customers have recommenced operations, and this should have a positive impact on Airships' financial performance going forward. Thanks, Ramesh. We can move over to the next slide. Chairperson, then I will touch a little bit on EXA. Government did provide financial support to EXA through the purchase of preference shares in the company, and this purchase amounted to 2.3 billion rand. The support to EXA was necessitated by the adverse impact of the travel restriction that travel restrictions had on EXA's revenue-generating activities. Because of this, EXA incurred a loss in 2021-22, but the quantum of the loss has reduced to 1.47 billion from the 2.56 billion incurred in 2020-21. On a positive note, Chair, the passenger volumes are expected to go back to pre-pandemic levels, and no fiscal support is envisaged for AXA going forward. We've had discussions with AXA on their corporate plan and their planning, and they've projected that they will start generating profits again from the 2023-2024 financial year onwards. That's it from our side. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Patu. Mr. Lefenze Radikalere.
Thanks very much, Ravesh. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, members. Yeah, the story on the land bank seems a bit slow. Okay. Although the current board, which is the new board that was actually appointed in December, is trying very hard to get a much more faster movement on what is happening at the bank. Now the challenge we're facing is that the CEO of the land bank, who was actually overseeing the operations of the land bank, has left the land bank. The minister has approved that the CFO, the current CFO, can now act, and she's trying her best to actually run the business of the bank. Chair, you'll remember we reported that the last liability solution was rejected by the lenders. So there's basically more work that is being done by the board to agree with the lenders with regards to the new liability solutions. There have been some workshops that have been happening between the lenders and the bank, so that they can find a way of actually agreeing on what actually stopped and actually made the liability solution, the previous liability solution, not to actually find success. The 7 billion recapitalization is still with National Treasury, not yet transferred. Mampo spoke about the 5 billion that was supposed to have been transferred last year. We're hoping that this year we'll be able to transfer 6 billion of the 7 billion if everything goes according to plan and the liability solution is actually agreed with the lenders. We are all praying. The land bank has actually, the board has actually promised the minister that they will actually have this liability solution concluded and implemented, beginning to be implemented from the end of September this year. And we are all hoping that nothing will actually make this thing to actually fail. The financial annual financial statements for the land bank, which were actually submitted late, were actually tabled in Parliament this May. And so which we see as progress, because we're worried about this delay. Ravesh, you can move to your next slide. Fine. This is a summary of the key issues that actually are in the annual report of the land bank. The operations of the land bank are not as bad as one can actually suspect. So the land bank has made some form of profit, 1.3 billion. But Chair, you'll notice that this profit is mainly due to the revision of the provisions, impairment provisions. It's not necessarily driven by the operations of the bank. So if you include these revisions of the provisions, the bank is basically making about 129.8 million, which is far less than what the number that you see above there. There are also net loans and advances that are decreasing. Mainly is because you will notice that land bank is not actually making much business with regards to disbursements. So, and what they are focusing now on is more of the repayments of the loan book. The NPLs, which is the sad part of it, the NPLs have actually increased drastically, which actually makes the books of the bank look very bad. And the main reason is due to clients migrating from stage 1 to stage 2 and 3, which basically says that they are moving from a performing status to non-performing status. And this has actually resulted in the NPL ratio basically increasing from 32.5 reported last year to 45.6, which if you look at it, Chair, is a big number. So yeah, it's causing trouble for the land bank, and everybody's worried about this increasing level of NPLs. But the land bank has actually indicated that it's implementing an NPL remediation plan overseen by the Credit and Investment Committee. We're hoping that we'll begin to start seeing results of this plan. The land bank at the same time is beginning to...
Excuse me? Oh, okay. No, I'll continue. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. All right. The payments, the servicing of the... There's also a capital reduction that land bank has actually been making. If you remember, Chair, the land bank started with a debt book of about 40 billion. Now, land bank has been servicing this book. It has dropped to a point of now it's at 24.5 billion. Now, that tells you that, and this payment is basically made from a larger portion of it. It's made from the recollections that land bank is actually making from their loan book. The total debt owed to international lenders is 4.8 billion. A fourth capital reduction is currently being implemented, and sooner or later, as soon in the next month, in the next few months, land bank will be actually repaying part of this debt. So it's beginning to decrease and decrease. The cash and cash equivalents were 8.9 billion as at 31st December 2021, which is an increase of 3.3 billion from the 5.6 billion recorded in March 2021. And reasons for this is which mainly comprises of the 12.3 billion collected from clients as well as other income, which is about 450 million rands. But this is normally offset, or is actually partially offset by the customer disbursements of 867.4 and capital and interest repayments of 8.6 billion and 427 million utilized in running and operations of the land bank. So when you look at these numbers, you realize that the land bank is not actually sitting in a very bad position. The only problem is that they're not doing much of the business that they're supposed to be doing. And we're hoping that as soon as the liability solution is being implemented, we'll begin to see the land bank starting to do what it's supposed to do on a daily basis and serving as the agricultural sector. Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes it from Treasury. Thank you.
Dr. Mampo, anything else?
We are good. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mampo, DM, and your team. All members, as the DM indicated, he has left the meeting. All members, you know how we do it. You know how we do it. Can I have indications of honorable members who would like to interact with the presentation?
Matafa.
Honorable Matafa. Honorable members.
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso. Honorable members.
The person can Comrade Kaiso and Matafa allow me to jump the queue?
Yeah, it's me who will allow you, Honorable Menzana.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any other honorable member? I've got Matafa, I've got Kaiso, I've got Honorable Menzana. Any other honorable member would like to interact with the presentation? Okay, so that we, if Darren, you'll indicate when other honorable members would like to talk. Let me allow Honorable Menzana to jump the queue.
No, thanks, Chairperson. Let me just show my face that at least I'm not dead.
Yeah,
I'm not dead, but these things, when Ugola, immediately you go to see the doctor, you become well. I'm now waiting to be called in for consultation. That's why I want to jump the queue. Thanks for allowing me.
No.
Just one question, Chair. But let me start by appreciating. I've been part DM and Dr. Mampo for the whole day. I've been part of the processes, and let me appreciate all that has happened throughout the day up until now with this last presentation. Just one question, Principal. If the Principal, Dr. Mampo can deal with it. Dr. Mampo has been, giving us a term which is not new. I think I once used this term of the serial underspenders. Now, my question is, I'm putting Dr. Mampo this question for the second time, but now put the other way around. What is it that we can do to force, I'm using this term force, Chairperson, deliberately, to force these departments and entities to adhere to the expenditure trends without fail, whilst at the same time we manage the relations that you would have, for instance, a department-to-department relation wherein a Treasury is not and shouldn't be seen as a bigger brother department than the others. But at the same time, reality is that there has to be guidance, there has to be some element of one giving instructions to the other if we want to realize this at the end of the day. Then my last comment would be, Chair, I'm not sure if UTM would be able, because it's political, to comment. If ever there is what is called a spoiled child in the family, that is Eskom. I really do not understand. We always worry about Eskom. It's us who is worrying about Eskom, whereas Eskom isn't even worrying about itself. This consistent and perpetual defiance by Eskom is worrying. It's a comment, Chair. I don't know if DM would be able to comment. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Lenzana. Good to see you back. I know you have been here the whole day, and you had said that you were not feeling okay. But thank you very much for joining. But unfortunately, I did say, Honorable Lenzana, that the DM had requested to be excused. He's no longer in the meeting, but Dr. Mampo will have to respond to that. Okay, can I borrow Matafa, then you can take your rightful position. Just assume you are number one. Honorable Lenzana didn't come in.
No problem. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Dr. Mampo and the team. My greetings to the DM in absentia since he was here. Chair, I'll be very brief. Let me join Honorable Lenzana and thank the presenters for the work that they have done and the presentations they've put for the committee to discuss. I also, Chair, would want to speak on the issue of underspending, but also again to appreciate the work that has been done to look into the details of the underspending, particularly as it relates to goods and services, what is contained therein. And one item, Chair, that I'm worried about, and I just want Dr. Mampo and the team just to indicate for us what efforts are being made to ensure that this critical item that is reflected within goods and services is addressed and actually the spending is improved there. And that item, Chair, is on the one that is called training and development. Every time we sit and engage on the poor performance, underspending, maladministration, the issue of lack of capacity in the state is raised. Here are funds allocated for training and development, and yet they are not spent. So I'm just interested to find out what can be done if there is no clarity what is happening now to address this particular area. I'm raising this, Chair, because one department that Honorable Mlenzana will consider as a serial underspender will be the military veterans. What worries me, Chair, is that you would have seen military veterans going on strike, in some instances being arrested for allegedly kidnapping or holding certain ministers against their wish, because their benefits are not being paid. What is due to them is not being paid. But we are sitting here and money is being referred back to the National Revenue Fund by the very same department that is supposed to be addressing the plight of the military veterans. For me, it's a concern, Chair. The other point, Chair, the third one, it's on the issue of ESCOM. It is stated in the presentation that 31.7 billion has been advanced in the previous financial year. I want Treasury to confirm to us, or just maybe clarify if whether it's true that 12 billion of this particular 31 billion rands has been spent irregularly. Now, that is worrying, Chair, because we all know that there were problems with ESCOM in terms of the internal controls. But if we are saying ESCOM is unable to sustain itself, but the little that is advanced to them, it's irregularly spent, it becomes a problem, especially when there are no consequences. My interest is to find out, yes, we see in the media that the previous management and functionaries are being taken through the law processes. But currently, the irregular expenditure is happening. What measures are being taken to ensure that this is eradicated? Because I think the shareholder will take serious interest where they advance money or equity injection, and that equity injection is irregularly spent. And there are no targets that are met from the shareholder complaint. For me, it's concerning, Chair. Those two items on ESCOM, what is being done on irregular expenditure? Secondly, what also is being done on the shareholder compact targets that are not being raised? Lastly, it is worrying, Chair, that we have an abundance of coal in the country, but yet we have a situation where we spend billions of rands on OCGTs, which traditionally are not supposed to be the primary generation platforms. I just want to find out if whether the Treasury has received any indication from ESCOM how best are they going to try to move away from using diesel in order to power the country. Chair, let me pause there for now and appreciate the opportunity you have given me to participate in the discussion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Kaiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And thank you, Deputy Minister, and the team of Treasury led by Dr. Mampu. Honorable Chair, let me quickly fall in on the footsteps of the advocate Oscar Matafa on points that he sharply raised there with regard to, this underspending. It's really a headache that we have been dealing with, and also that there is a summary which then the Treasury gives us to say over the past 3 years, seemingly there has been consistent department which have not backed down in as far as continuation with underspending. water and sanitation, treasury, environmental affairs, agriculture has been top of the range. Now, treasury was not supposed to be one of them. Let me start there. Treasury was not supposed to be one of those departments to be, in the list of the top 5. I mean, it gives a bad example. Now, I'm worried about when once read the summary report that we were given on the 12th of May, which says a total of 14.9 billion is money which has been underspent, over this period that we have been given the report on. So it should be a biggest concern for this committee, given the situation such as the one that the DM has spoken about with regard to, the performance of our local municipalities with reference to, for instance, Emangau Metro, where the potholes are more than the streets. So, so yet we have an amount of 14.9 billion rand, which department are unable to spend and utilize for the benefit of service delivery is a serious warning. I mean, a serious worry to ourselves as a committee. Now, perhaps we have to dig deep again, although I don't see the breakdown in terms of province. Why I'm saying provinces? Perhaps it will give us an opportunity to have a discussion, even having to call provinces whom we think they are reflecting well in the reporting as far as the treasury breakdown, but I don't see that breakdown, or I may have not read it very well. But I would have loved that because at some stage we're at a position where we were saying, no, let's call that province to come and account on this, what we are seeing here. In the absence of any other further measure that the Treasury cannot come up with to hold this, uncontrollable underspending that is continuing, then we must also include, having to convene province or department at the provincial level now, because we have to take things on our hands so that we pursue what we want to achieve in as far as accountability is concerned. I thought at some stage, Dr. Mampo, you will come with a list in your pocket of those culprits in as far as consequent management is concerned. At some stage, we want to talk about this, but it doesn't seem to be forthcoming, so that we need to name and shame people. It's not like that there is no letter or word which says, now we are going to put stop on this forcefully, we are going to do 1, 2, 3. And I believe everything is there in the letter and the paper that this is what's supposed to happen. So, but I don't see it coming, saying, in as far as the provinces or whatever department is concerned, these were the measures in terms of consequent management is concerned, we have identified as Treasury, that these departments have went to town in as far as tracing all people who are involved in as far as, PFMA, in as far as it is concerned. So that now people take account to take accountability to what they are being employed to. So I haven't seen that. I know it's not Treasury which is going to sit there and discipline people, but I'm saying at least when the report is being tabled and say we have now come up to a 14.9 billion rand over the past. I'm just referring now to the 3 consecutive years. 3 consecutive years. Let me reduce it to only 3 years, as you have put it, 3 years consecutive period of departments doing the same mistake repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. It has now become a norm and a tradition of those departments that no, come March, there will be a spike. Come 2022, 2023, 24, we are going forward with this March spike without any consequent management. So I would have loved that Dr. Mampo, you say, no, Treasury has seen that department have taken measures where people have been taken to task there in as far as this management of consequent management is concerned. Now, so I wanted to say, where is the breakdown in terms of the up-to-date level of problems, so that we can be able to see where this trend is actually, centered, so that we can be able to say, okay, in the meantime, we will definitely have to step in as a committee and convene that province to come, or that departmental, provincial department, come here now, because we have been seeing this trend. It's uncontrollable from your side. And then, we must congratulate those departments that over the same said period have been at least trying their all best to do well, like Department of Public Service and Administration, if I've read it well here. We must also be able to say they are congratulated that at least over the past period, they've been trying all their best, to utilize the scarce resources that they've been allocated for by Treasury. So they've been able to at least meet their expectations. Yes. But with the department, I want to agree with Advocate Matafora to say, look, with the department such as military veterans, it's very much disturbing that you would have a such underspending in the face of what is shaping around those military veterans. It's a very painful history, and it shouldn't be happening at this stage. That the only slightest problem about the department is unable to spend. That one cannot be acceptable, Honorable Chair. So there must be some, drastic measures that now curb that practice and put it to end. Now, if a department, for instance, is unable to spend on goods and service, 45% underspending, it's like that department is no longer existent. It's not existing. So what is the use of having that department underspending its budget by 45%? No. It's very wrong. So I don't want to repeat the issue on ESCOM that my colleague has already spoken about. But then I want to come to the issue of post office. Yes, I want to agree because the poor in the rural areas, they still need post office. And therefore, even if I see here that there is an understanding that it should not be assisted, if I read very, very well the presentation with that 7 billion rand. And so, so, Honorable Chair, I'm sorry for that. I was taking care of something. So we still need ESCOM for now, despite the fact that it had, SAPO had at some stage refused to say they are retrenching workers. I don't know how retrenchment of workers shape in the spirit of economic recovery and job creation. It doesn't make a sense. So one would appreciate if there could be measures that are taken in such a way that we save the post office and redesign it in such a way that it must still continue as a South African post office, continue to offer, service to our poor people in the rural communities, so that they can reach their end. So let me stop at this stage, Honorable Chair, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Honorable Kaiso, thank you very much. Can I just check, is there any other honorable member who would like to say something? Okay. Honorable Lenzana, anything which has crossed your mind? Honorable Matafa?
Nothing at the moment, Chair. Thank you very much.
Honorable Kaiso? Honorable Kaiso? Okay. Let me come in.
Honorable Chair?
Yes, Honorable Kaiso? Yeah, I was saying,
No.
do you have something to add? I was giving you the second bite.
Okay, Chair. No, I think so far. Let me stay there for now, Chair, and wait for responses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let me start by joining the oral members in thanking the presentation, and Dr. Mampo, the timing of the presentation couldn't have been better, as we are busy dealing with the bill. Honorable Kaiso, please mute all your gadgets. We still see you here. Okay. No, I was saying that the presentation by National Treasury couldn't have come at a better time, as we are busy dealing with the 2022 appropriation bill. I think the background, again, it's a situation where when we interact with different departments here, all of them complain about the cutting of their budgets. And then budgets are being given to them. Now we find ourselves in this situation, the situation of what Dr. Mampo calls March spikes, fiscal dumping, and to the question of underspending. And there's no doubt from where we were seated that once we are having that March spike, there's a lot of inefficient spending of the resources, because people are doing that without necessarily wanting to get value, but because they wanted to convince National Treasury that they need more money. So I think that's the background. And again, say the way that you broke down the sources of under expenditure. One thing that you talk about departments, but economically where they come from, which budget items are being underspent. It also helps the committee to understand exactly the impact of that underspending. Then my questions, the first one, it's more about clarification. For instance, if there's underspending on buildings and other structures, what does that mean? Let me leave it there. Can you please expand on that? What does it mean? Is it the building of buildings, or is it accommodation? What is it exactly? And from your side, the implications of underspending on goods and services to the general macroeconomic environment and what we are trying to do. We see again there's underspending on bursaries in some of the departments. I think this is unacceptable. There are so many children who are on the streets who would like to be in universities, in other tertiary institutions, but their bursaries were underspent. Again, the implications of this on human capital formation. But just remind us which departments are underspending on bursaries. And then again, this is related to buildings. There's underspending on housing. What does that exactly mean? And please differentiate between the two. And then your March spikes, Dr. Mampo, how is that related to the failure of some of the departments to pay service providers, especially the small businesses and the big companies within 30 days? National Treasury, you seem to be understanding this thing, the reasons, for instance, that despite the fact that this parliament came and appropriated 7 billion rand to try and deal with the challenges of the land bank. The main reason for parliament to do that was to enable the bank to continue performing its business. And its business is to fund farmers, and again, the domino effect of that, or the positive multiplier effects of doing that. But here we are getting, I don't call it reasons, I think these are excuses, that this thing is still not resolved. What must we say on this one? Can we have some definite time frames? This thing that the CEO has left, there's a new board and so on, I don't think it's sailing with us. That institution, it's big. That thing can't depend on individuals. But if my memory serves me well, we had said before that we would like the shareholder minister and ministry to be involved in the resolution of this problem. We can't approach it on a pedestrian, to be on a pedestrian mode in dealing with these things. The farmers out there are suffering. The emerging farmers are out there are suffering, but this has got huge unemployment implications. What we are trying to do with the economy, businesses are not able to access a funding from the land bank. I would like to hear what exactly are you saying about this. I think I also agree with Honorable Kaiso that when it's National Treasury doing this, then we're in serious trouble. We definitely need a better explanation when it comes to that. Dr. Mampo, when if the team that you're having is not able to give us the definitive dates, when is this thing going to be resolved? I know that there are many parties involved, but when I listen to the presentation, it's just one of those things. And here we're talking about all these implications of the inability to transfer the money and resolve the issues which are there. And again, I think each and every day which passes without resolving this thing well, there's interest that we're incurring there and many other costs. So it's apart from the opportunity cost of failure to fund the farmers. I think on ESCOM, Honorable Matafa has also touched about what has been going on in the media as far as irregular expenditure. But with ESCOM, you'll know that if it's not irregular expenditures, it's deviations, huge deviations, and deviations that people are saying that we are not going to do things according to the laws that this parliament has passed. And that's unacceptable. If we're going to give exception to certain companies and government departments, let's do to everybody, because it can't be right that there are some institutions which are allowed to spend money appropriated by this parliament without following the laws and without following the policies that are there. If that can be noted, because we definitely are not accepting that. But having said that, the success of all said and done, the success of Eskom will be measured by its capacity to deliver electricity and decrease frequency of load shedding. I think we know what that does. We know what that does to the economy in general. But again, there is this thing that time and again we say, well, Eskom is going to NERSA, is going to court, because, for instance, if you look at the using of diesel, which is above what the norm, but again, that increases the cost of generating electricity, and that get passed to the consumers again, with all the pressures that consumers are facing, the inefficiencies which are there, that are being passed to the consumers. It's double jeopardy. I'll tell you why. Because the recapitalization of Eskom comes from the taxpayers. It doesn't come from anybody else. But the very same taxpayers, again, after having had these irregular expenditures, the deviations, and again, we go back to the very same consumers to say they must pay higher rates for their electricity. That chokes the whole economy, so to speak. Yeah, coming to SAPO, I think the main thing that I got was the question of expenditure, which is greater than revenue, and it continues to be a concern. But from our side, I think what we are more concerned on is that what is being done about it, not necessarily by Treasury, but since you are reporting on this thing, we'd like to know exactly what is being done about it, what is the solution, because it doesn't help us to come year in, year out, quarter in, quarter out, and again we get this story. But the main thing is what is being done about that. SAA, again, through this committee, Parliament, recapitalization, and we've been told about for years that we need a strategic equity partner. What is the status of the strategic equity partner of SAA? And then, are we going to say that SAA is out of the woods? I think we need that assurance. We've just heard that Kulula, I think and so on, then they've cancelled their flights. Are we going to hear a similar thing from SAA? Mango, will Mango be back? Will Mango fly again? And if so, when? I think that's again that's our main focus on these things. And then again, as you know, that there are airlines which are flying, which don't have recapitalization from government. Airlink, it's flying. FlySafe is in the air, and they're busy hemorrhaging the market share of both Mango and SAA. So my question is, how much of SAA and Mango market share have been hemorrhaged and taken by other airlines? I think Dr. Mampo, you will then decide who deals with what, and once you are finished with the responses, you'll bring back the meeting to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Ravesh, let's start with all the SOC's questions, please.
Thanks, Mampo, and thanks, Honorable Chair. I think we are going to get Jeff to respond on ESCOM. We're going to get Part 2 to respond on SAA, and then George on the post office. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. If I may start with the comment by Honorable Mlenzana. I think we share his comment. We are equally concerned with ESCOM's reliance on the fiscus. Our intent is to see ESCOM being on a standalone basis, being able to honor its obligations. We are trying our level best to develop a solution that will assist ESCOM to stand on their own. We are certainly concerned. This is our preoccupation to ensure that at a particular point in time, ESCOM does turn around and is able to actually relieve the fiscus from the exposure that it sits with now. If I then move on to Honorable Matafa, the equity allocation, we must just state it, Honorable Matafa, that it's purely and ring fence to redeeming the debt and the interest. It's not used for any other ESCOM's expenditure. So our understanding and our regular monitoring of ESCOM is to ensure that the money goes to where it is intended. And if it were to actually go to something else, I think even the auditors will be able to pick it up, because this is a condition of that ESCOM needs to comply with, and that we monitor on a regular basis. So the 12 billion of irregular expenditure, our colleagues at OCPO are seized with that matter with ESCOM. But from an equity point of view, this money certainly goes towards redeeming the interest and the debt. As I've indicated in the presentation, that we've seen a slight decrease from a debt point of view at March 31st. So it did go towards redeeming the debt. From an OCGT point of view, I think this is also what the chair alluded to. For ESCOM to stop using the OCGT, and we are quite correct, the diesel the diesel station are not meant to be used as a baseload station or fleet, but they are meant to be used at a particular point in time to actually assist with the picking. But the manner in which ESCOM now is actually using them is quite hard. And for them to stop using that, it's for them to actually improve on the maintenance of their fleet. The increase that I've alluded to on the unplanned losses contributes directly to the overusage of these diesel stations. So for ESCOM to reduce their reliance on OCGT, they have to improve on the maintenance. They have to bring online into the system the Medupis and Kusiles and ensure that all the defects that have been identified are corrected. So that is the only way, is to improve their fleet availability, so that it can then improve the energy availability, and that will have a knock-on effect on the usage of OCGTs as well as the financial impact, which the chair alluded to, that any over expenditure on the OCGT, then ESCOM then takes it to the regulator for the regulator to make a determination. But we must also indicate, Chair, that when the regulator looks at the at ESCOM's usage of OCGT, they do interrogate whether those that expenditure has been prudently incurred. If they find that it is not prudently incurred, they disallow from a recovery from a tariff point of view. But it does have a knock-on effect on the entities liquidity position. And Chairperson, you are quite correct as well, that they say that inefficiencies need to be taken out completely from the system, so that ESCOM is getting a true cost of supply, and that should be reflected in the tariff. So this is where the regulator should come in, and that's why we're saying it's important for the regulator to complete its processes in terms of the methodology that needs to be implemented for the next coming financial years, so that ESCOM is able to then be interrogated from that point of view, and there's clarity and transparency on how ESCOM's application will be adjudicated. I think I've dealt with all the ESCOM questions, Chairperson and honourable members. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. George and then Patu, and Lefenz after that for Land Bank.
Thanks, Todesh. We'll answer some of the question that is raised on SAPO regarding, let me just look at the question, or the ongoing expenditure that is currently and constantly also higher than its revenues. So on the Treasury side, we sit on a monitoring team that we, on a monthly basis and quarterly basis, we sit with SAPO where they report as to what is happening in the NTG, particularly also regarding the development of their new strategy, which they had since submitted. And in their strategy, they have plans in there where over and above the slight tweaks in the legislation, they are taking advantage of the fact that they've always reported that they have, in some areas of the business, they've already had a little bit of excess human capital. So prior to the VSPs that you see reported, they've had to rotate some of the staff around to actually manage efficiencies, like cost efficiencies within relatively, like if you talk of one province, it's branch management, cost in branch management. That's one of the low-level detail that is actually going on there. So it's also like it's a, how should I say, it's part of the success that they've always had funds ahead of doing a lot of the work that they've had to do. And then, the result is that the people applying for VSPs end up not taking them because I think it would have been lucrative to stay on rather than leave. But this time around, there seems to be, there's no promise of a lot of ongoing money by implication of an allocation or some form of guarantee. So we're seeing that work has been done, and SAPO is finding itself to be, I want to say, more productive on that objective. And that's the question on SAPO. Thanks,
Thanks, George. Over to Patu.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Chairperson. So I'll deal with the questions on SAA and Mango. The first question is around the SEP and when will this process be completed. So the DPE is running, the Department of Public Enterprises is, together with SAA, are running with the Strategic Equity Partner process. And we do not have an exact date on when that will be finalized, but there is ongoing interactions with between ourselves and them on a monthly basis. When we do have some sort of indication, we'll be able to provide feedback, but the DPE is better placed to deal with the timelines around the finalization of the SEP process. The second question is around the loss of market share by SAA and Mango. Obviously, there has been a loss of market share. Firstly, SAA is at the moment not operating any intercontinental flights. They have reduced their domestic operations, and obviously this has allowed other players to come in and fill in the gap in the market. But I mean, as we've seen, the passenger aviation industry operates on very low margins, and you have to make sure that you are able to operate efficiently and generate profits. Otherwise, you are going to make losses, just as we've seen with the example, Chairperson of ComAir, that you alluded to, that they had to now stop operations because they were operating on a loss-making basis. And in terms of are we going to see the same happening to SAA? I mean, our opinion is they've reduced their fixed cost base significantly. SAA has to ensure that they continue to operate on an efficient basis, that they prioritize financial sustainability at this present moment, so that they do not continue to pose a risk to the fiscus. Yeah, so Ramesh, I think on SAA and also the last question was on Mango, when will Mango resume operations? So the last tranche of funding for Mango was provided to the airline on the 31st of March of this financial year. And the purpose of that funding was to finalize the business rescue process and the restructuring of the airline. As the National Treasury at the moment, we do not have an exact date of when Mango will resume operations, or in what form and what, for instance, what routes they will be flying when operations are resumed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patu. And then Delphente, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. To answer your question, I'll need to give a long-winded response, but it will address your question. If you remember very well, okay, let me start by saying we are very concerned with the slow pace at the land bank. And at some point, the minister had indicated when he was actually addressing the land bank to say that we need to find a solution to this fast. Otherwise, he'll have an option to take the 7 billion and give it to some other entity that belongs to the government to give to the farmers if land bank cannot resolve this. That's how the minister actually takes these matters very, very serious. So he was actually saying to the bank, don't give me an option to take this money away from you if you don't want to resolve this issue with the lenders. But if we have to go back and say, what was the land bank situation when it defaulted in 2020? What affected the land bank was a cross default. And as such, because it's a cross default, it basically means the lenders had the right to actually take or claim or attach the assets of the land bank to the value of the total debt. Now let's look at the numbers. Okay, I've opened a table here. In 2020 March, land bank was sitting at a total assets of 44.5 billion. The total debt was around 43 billion. Equity was 1.7 billion. And then other investments were about 2 billion. And the cash and cash equivalents were 700 million. Now, if you take these numbers, what we were trying to do was to negotiate with the lenders not to liquidate the bank, because if they could have liquidated the bank at that point, we would not be having the bank now, because every asset would have been taken by these lenders. And what we agreed with them was for us to negotiate on how best to deal with the situation in order to save the bank. And as we sit now, they still have the option to liquidate the bank, but they have not. And it's understandable that they demand certain things from the bank. Otherwise, I'm sure if we don't reach some form of an agreement at some point, the lenders will actually go the liquidation route, which would actually kill the bank completely.
Defense.
Okay.
Yeah. So just on that one, so that you complete it, right?
Yes.
Are we incurring any costs in the meantime because of us not being able to resolve this issue, or it stopped somewhere? I'm sure you get my my drift.
Yes.
I want to, because I would like to.
We're not necessarily incurring costs because of the negotiations that they are having with the bank. We're not necessarily incurring costs. But the only cost that we're having is that we are not being able to serve the sector. And as such, it becomes very difficult for land bank to generate revenue except to collect money that is owed to the land bank. So the sector is actually suffering. And this is the biggest cost that the government and South Africa is actually incurring. With regards to the lenders, the negotiations I have actually in a sense that we are actually have requested the lenders to basically stop from anything that they can do that will actually make life of the land bank very difficult. Otherwise, hence I was saying, if there was any, the lenders can actually go the cruel route. They would actually make us to incur very huge costs. But the problem, the thing is, these negotiations, we expect them, the lenders, to actually compromise. Government to compromise and meet each other halfway. And the compromise that the land bank has actually, the government has made, was to actually provide land and the money. There's 3 billion that was given to the lenders, to land bank, and also the 7 billion that is supposed to go, which is costing government about 10 billion all in all to save the land bank. As we speak, lenders expect us to provide guarantees, and they also expect us to provide more recapitalization in order to make sure that they don't find themselves incurring losses. What they define as what you call tail risk, or what you can actually define in simple accounting terms, the credit risk. That's the situation that we are facing. And like I said earlier on, the minister has actually said to the land bank, and he has also made that statement to some representative of the lenders, that he's faced with a situation where if we don't resolve this issue, he'll have to decide what to do with the 7 billion. That's how we are. And that's how bad the situation is. But we are hoping that at some point we will reach some agreement before September, and then we begin to see the land bank going back to do its business the way it's supposed to be doing it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chairperson. We're done from the SOC's perspective. Mampo, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravesh. Thanks, Chairperson. Chair, can I ask Ulrike, Lebu, and Rendani to deal with their sections, and then I will conclude with the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mambo. So let me start with Honorable Matafa's questions around training and development and capacity and the lack of capacity. I suppose the other side of the coin, Honorable Matafa, would be around accountability and ensuring that when we have proper people who are properly skilled and employed, that they are held accountable for the work that they do. And where we fail to hold people accountable, we never identify the gaps around training and development to ensure that we have the right people in the jobs, and that they're doing their jobs and that they're doing their jobs well. So it's easy to have a training and development budget and not spend that budget when the system doesn't identify the gaps that managers need to be actively managing to ensure that that employees do what they need to do, when they need to do it, how they need to do it, and that they do it well, I suppose. So we can, so if we fail to hold people accountable across the value chain, and if managers aren't held accountable for the underperformance of people, then this is what happens. And until we fix the accountability side, I suppose we're never going to see the side that needs to ensure that we have a public service that excels. In relation to Honorable Kaiso's questions around the serial underspenders and the Department of Water and Sanitation specifically, and this might answer some of the questions in relation to invoices that are not being paid on time and the like. So one of the things that we need to do in the capital budgets of departments is that before invoice is paid for work that is undertaken, is to ensure that the work was undertaken in relation to the contract specifications, and that does take some time. And maybe one of the things that we need to think about or assist the department in thinking about is how they manage in the contract management, how that is then managed relative to their budget, because this is going to be a serial problem. If you get an invoice from a service provider in the 3rd or the 2nd week of March, you have to go out on site, verify that the work was done, verify that the work was done to the specifications that it was, i.e. the pipe was made from the materials it said it was going to be made from, the pipe is as big as they said it should be, and all of those things. And as a result of that, you're always going to have invoices. The nature of the business is that you're always going to have a set of invoices that you won't pay until you are satisfied with the quality of the work that is being produced. What we don't want is for somebody to just say, oh, here's a rush of invoices in the last 2 weeks of the financial year to pay it, and then we have to deal with shoddy workmanship and the like. So I think with the Department of Water and Sanitation, and I think it's like that with all, in fact, actually with the entire capital budgets. Honorable Chair, you were asking what is buildings and other fixed structures. It's the capital spending. It would include not necessarily just office accommodation, but things like at national level, anything that is related to kind of infrastructure spending. These would be schools that are built, a pipeline, a road. Those are other fixed structures, and that's what we refer to. This is the primary component within an infrastructure budget of a department. Mampo, that's all from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Ulrika Lebu. Do you have any comment?
Thank you very much. Yes, my comment was on the land bank. Because of the situation at the land bank, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, to make sure that they fast-track support towards the sector, the farmers in particular. They are broadening their interventions and including DFIs, for instance, like I've indicated in the earlier presentation, the IDC to help, in terms of funding the farmers. And because the lenders don't want to loan anymore to land bank until the matter is resolved, we have the jobs fund that is coming, in the space in the form of, issuing loans, to the farmers, and the government will come in the form of grants. So it will be a blended finance kind of a mechanism where the government will come in with grants, and the jobs fund will come with loans at affordable rates to the farmers, to make sure that this thing of the land bank doesn't delay or doesn't direct support towards farmers and stifle developments in the sector. Thank you.
Brendani?
Thanks, Mampo, and good afternoon, honorable members. I just want to make comments regarding Military Veterans Department. We share your concerns. The department has been in the ICU, if I can put it that way, for quite some time. And I think ever since it was established, I don't know how many acting DGs we had in that department, not permanent, just acting. There's been management and leadership instability. We just hope that the project led by the Deputy President will at least take us somewhere, especially dealing with all the challenges that department has been experiencing. There are various work streams that has been established, focusing on specific issues. For example, the legislation work stream, looking at the revision of the legislation, the socio-economic work stream, the pension work stream, and the organizational work stream. Because I think part of the observation is that the skill set that we have is not fit for the purpose. So these are some of the initiatives happening in the department. The DG we have now is a permanent DG. I think appointed sometimes last year. We just hope and pray that at least things will start happening. So sometimes when things like this happens, we also begin to ask ourselves as to whether the way the department is structured, is it structured correctly? Was it supposed to be a department, or was it supposed to be something else? Because most of the acting appointments were from defense, and we begin to say perhaps this department, it was not supposed to be a department, but perhaps maybe a unit within defense, which was still going to deliver all the benefits as legislated. This is not going to take away any benefits as legislated in law. Chairperson, you also raised a question around buildings and other fixed structures. What does underspending mean? So what it means is that something didn't happen. For example, a court which you should have maintained, it was not maintained, meaning that by the time we get there, for us to maintain it, it won't be maintenance anymore. Perhaps it's going to be rehabilitation, or it's no longer fit for occupation, then we condemn it. A police station which we should have completed maybe this year, it will be completed maybe in the following financial year, maybe at a higher cost than currently budgeted for. That's in simple terms what it means. I will end here. Thanks, Chairperson and honorable members.
Thank you, Rendani. Thanks to the team. So, Chairperson, just in terms of underspending, I think it's only fair that I assist the committee in dwelling into this underspending. So there are two types of underspending that we look at as the Treasury. The first one is an underspending because of savings that the departments have incurred. So, for example, if the departments continued with the cost containment or having virtual meetings and not spending money on catering, travel and subsistence, that type of understanding is welcome because it means the departments are now efficiently and effectively using their funding. But there's also the understanding that is a big problem, and that underspending would be underspending that results in lesser service delivery than what would have been if the department would have spent the money. The reasons for that, Chairperson and honorable members, vary completely from department to department, but what we basically pick up is that there are issues where the service delivery model is a problem. And one of those examples would be the Defence Force wanting to manage their own buildings, but the buildings are managed by Public Works. You know, the efficiency there, can the Defence Force do better? I mean, one will have to see if these services will go back to the Defence Force, but the service delivery model can have an impact on another department's ability to spend the funds. Then you have departments where there's a lot of acting people, especially at high levels, where you find that decisions are not really taken because the people who are there are acting and they don't feel that they have the authority to do this. And also, Chairperson, you find that sometimes the skills, the capacity in a department is not sufficient enough for them to execute what they need to execute. Then you also have changes in whether political heads or DGs, and once you have that change, the new person who's coming in, of course, they'll have different priorities, and that also can lead to delays in services. The other one that we're going to deal with, Chairperson, unfortunately, will be the Concord judgment and the fact that there were other departments and provinces who didn't procure any goods because of that Concord. So this year in 2022-23, in the first couple of months, we might see underspending. And that's not because the departments were inefficient or they couldn't spend. It's just that entire court case and the what it meant and the interpretation of it could have impacted other departments' ability to spend. So there's those things that tend to affect the underspending. And another one that we're picking up, Chairperson, which is a controversial one, is whether we appoint the people who have the relevant skills at this relevant position, because it doesn't help to have people in positions, but they cannot perform the function. So those are just the reasons for this underspending when group them into different categories. So the biggest question, Chairperson, that we always think about before we even come and appear in this committee is, we know that the committee would want to understand what is it that we are doing to assist the departments to avoid some of this underspending. And the one thing that we continue to do, Chairperson, would be the monthly monitoring of the department spending. And we always highlight some of these issues that we're picking up during the course of the year, where we can see that departments are not spending. The other one that we do, Chairperson, to try and assist the departments is that when we come to the MTBPS, we will, there's items where we via money from projects that they are not able to spend on, but looking at whether they still need the spending, because wiring money from a service that needs to be provided doesn't make it less important. So we need to watch that. But also what we do with the departments is that we ask them to declare some of the savings during the MTBPS so that we can use some of that money and allocate it to departments where they have capacity to spend and they have spending pressure. So that those adjustments, we make them in the MTBPS. And then we also do quite a lot of environment, and unfortunately, Chairperson, sometimes us as National Treasury contribute to the might sparks of departments in terms of allowing the departments to deal with the invoicing. And the reason that we do this, Chairperson, is that if the invoices are cleared and there are no disputes, and the department has funding that can be used to pay these invoices, we allow the departments to via the funds and pay for invoices instead of them waiting for the following year to see if they can have underspending and then pay a year later. So this, we only do it for departments where it is very clear that they resolved the disputes, the invoice are finalized, and they are clear, and then we assist them into pushing these invoices as much as they can. But these are some of the things that we do. And in terms of the dive in provincial budget, the team in Intergovernmental Relations, Chairperson, reports to the Select Committee on Appropriations. I think the report that they present there would also be good if they can share with this committee. Of course, I will speak to Member Dijeng so that she can also share the report with Darren, and then he can share it with the committee. But what I wanted to clarify was that the 14.9 billion that we are talking about, it's only at a national level. The provinces themselves have underspending that they are still trying to explain to their own legislatures. So this 14.9, it excludes the provinces. And then in terms of the buildings and other structures, Chairperson, you just wanted us to zoom into the departments that showed the most underspending. And without speaking about the numbers, the one that has the biggest underspending under buildings and other structures will be Department of Water and Sanitation at 1.5 billion. And then the next one would be police at 588 million, health 230 million, and then basic education 172, and lastly correctional services at 130 million. So those are the ones that have the most significant underspending. And then the housing item, Chairperson, that you see on slide 10, basically this is just the item that was there where in the past when government was still providing housing, but the money that was there was only 70 million. And after speaking to the data team, we think that was a misclassification. So in the next report, we definitely remove this housing item because it's no longer relevant for reporting. And the spike or the link between the mic spike and failure to pay within 30 days, I mean, that is possible, Chairperson, because as you saw, there's a lot of invoices that come in March. But as I said, allowing the departments to do the environment tends to assist greatly in dealing with some of these invoices, because what we don't want is to have accumulated invoices over years where the departments then at the end are unable to deal with all of these undisputed invoices. Chairperson, I think we covered most of the comments and the questions from the committee. Thank you so much, Chair.
Dr. Mampo and your team, thank you very much. I think you have been able to elucidate on a number of things. On top of your head, before I close, any correlation between these departments and institutions which are underspending and adverse audit finding?
For some, Chairperson, but it's not illegal to underspend. That's the problem.
Okay, come again. It's not all.
It's not illegal to underspend. So departments stress a lot about overspending, because there's consequences for overspending, but not for underspending.
Okay. You can see that creates a problem for service delivery, Robin.
Yes, Chair. Yes, it does.
Okay. Honourable members, thank you so much for engaging with the National Treasurer. National Treasurer, today you are an embedded department in the committee. We've been with you the whole day. We really appreciate that. And let's continue engaging some of these things. And we were quite aware that some of these things, they've got definitely their own managers and so on in departments somewhere. So when we pose these questions with you, it's because we are using you as our courier to engage with those departments and institutions who are guilty of this or that. So, and again, I think you have made the point many times, Team Treasurer, that you can do so much. These departments have got their own accounting authorities. They've got their own executives. Some of them have got their own boards and so on. And that's where the buck should stop. And even their own political heads. So we do take that into consideration. But we are not going to let you also go away without knowing how we feel with some of these things. And I think we should find a way ourselves of saying, how do we take these things forward? I think what one appreciates is that we are able to deal with these issues, right? Even before MTDPS. And I think it was a smart move, Dr. Mampo, that you come and brief the committee on these issues at this time while we are still busy with the 2022 appropriation bill. But I thank you very much. We may remain on the platform. We are very transparent, but I think we may also excuse you. Thank you very much for the engagement.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you so much to the committee.
Thank you. See, honourable members, then I'm trying to get to to our next agenda item is the approval of minutes. Yes, are we looking at the minutes of the 20th of May, 2022? Yes. Honourable members, the minutes of 20th of May 2022 have been sent to us. Guess we would have gone through them. Do I have the mover for the adoption of the minutes?
I move for the adoption of the minutes as presented, Chair. Thank you.
Honourable Matafa moves for the adoption. Seconder.
Kaiso seconds.
Honourable Kaiso seconds. So we'll adopt the minutes. And then can we go to the minutes of the 24th? Mover.
Honourable Dechale moves, Chair.
Honourable Dechale moves for the adoption. Seconder. Do I have a seconder for Honourable Dechale?
I second, Comrade Chair, Matafa.
Honourable Matafa second, thank you. We'll adopt the minutes of the 24th of May 2022 as the true reflection of that meeting. Honourable members, can we go to agenda item number 6? Darren? Agenda item
yes,
number,
Chairperson.
Agenda item number 6.
Announcements. Yes, Chairperson. I just want to open this invitation from the Portfolio Committee. I hope everybody can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, it was also distributed with the link. So it's basically an invitation from Portfolio Committee on Higher Education for Friday, 3 June from 9 until 1. So it's for the committee to decide how I should respond to the invitation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honourable members. I think one of the things that we have been talking about is a lack of working together between and amongst committees. So here is an initiative by one of the committees. Can we try and attend? Honourable members.
Honourable Chair.
Yes, Honourable Dechale.
I was going to attend, but we have a provincial conference.
That's fine, Honourable Dechale. I just need a principal, not necessarily individuals. I think we'll make the different apologies. But we know what you are saying, but I just want to check what the feeling is. And I said one of the criticisms that we have had, and I think is a valid one, is that committees work in silos and some of these things.
Honourable Chair. On that note, then I support the invitation, and I would want to encourage the committee to go and attend.
Okay, thank you. Honourable members. Yes, any counter suggestion? Honourable Kaiso?
No, agreed, Chair.
Thank you. So, honourable members, I think generally, obvious people may be having their some of the things which may make it impossible for them, but on principle, we are encouraged to come and to go and attend this meeting. Thank you. Any other announcement, Darren? Where are we now with the appropriation bill?
Chairperson, now we are entering the report drafting stage. So we're going to be busy over the weekend, and then next Wednesday we are adopting both the reports on the appropriation bill and the second adjustments appropriation bill.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair. There's still the outstanding oversight report. We still need to decide what we are going to do with that one.
I think let's prioritize the two bills, the reports of the two bills, and once we are done with that, then you'll continue working on the oversight report, right? And it would be good if we are able to send that report to Parliament before we rise. Okay, so that we know that we are done with with what we're supposed to do during this term. Okay, thank you very much. Honourable members, it has been a long day, and we really appreciate your patience, and you are engaging with the reports and the presentations that were given to us. Well appreciated. And our support staff, thank you very much. You sit there quietly, and at least we do talk, but the role that you play in supporting the committee is well appreciated. To the members of the public who have been on the platform, very much appreciated. We are a people's government, and what we do here is on behalf of the voters and the people who send us here. Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. The plenary is still on.
Good luck. The conference how
thank you.
So you need all the energy. You must rest. You must rest today and tomorrow. Okay, this brings us to the end of the meeting. Thanks, everybody. you.